So we are honored to be here. This is my company's 25th year as a member of IGLTA and my 24th convention. Just super excited to be here. A lot of old friends, hopefully a lot of new friends. So today is really about Canada. As we probably have discovered, there's a lot of data out there, not a whole lot on the Canadian tourism market. So that's a need that we worked with IGLTA and some of our partners to fulfill. A quick introduction of who we are for the newbies. We are a full-service market research firm focused exclusively on LGBTQ. We've been at it 25 years. We do surveys, focus groups, everything that a real research company does, but all focused on LGBTQ. And it's been a fantastic ride. We've been able to work with a variety of you in the audience, and these aren't even all the logos of the destinations we've gotten a chance to work with, but also with some of the hotel groups, some of the airlines out there, and beyond tourism and hospitality, which is about half of our business, we get to work with retail, media, the US government, beverages, all kinds of different companies are coming forward. We just finished a study for the US Census. So that's a little bit about us. As we probably heard, tourism is important. It's important to everybody in the room. It's important to all our countries. But it's about the employment. It's also about the business side. So we want to talk about LGBTQ specific tourism. That's estimated to be about $4.5 billion in Canada alone. And to do that, we launched a study. That's what we do. And this study is free for everybody in the room. We're going to post it to the website tonight. This is just a high-level overview of the survey. We don't really have time to go into a lot of detail, but it'll give you a hint of what's there, and then you can download it and dig deeper. So we want to thank, first of all, IGLTA for the long-time partnership working with us to raise everybody's boats. The reason we can post these research projects online for free for everybody. A lot of researchers charge a fortune for these kinds of studies. We put it there free because a lot of us in the room are here because we've been able to demonstrate the business case for LGBT. Back in the 90s, it was okay to kind of just raise the rainbow flag. But now it's all about the bottom line. It's all about return on investment. And in order to have that bottom line and return on investment, we need to demonstrate growth. We need to demonstrate profits. And that's really where the research comes in. So thank you very much to our research partners as well for helping to get the word out. So I'm going to introduce my longtime business partner and for 25 years best friend, David Paisley.
And I'm going to pop over here because the monitor's here. So I just want to introduce the research a little bit. First of all, at CMI, there's actually two reports that we're going to be talking about. We just did an LGBT-specific tourism study, but we've also been doing the community survey for a very long time, too, and there's a Canadian component to that. And each of these studies in Canada attracts about 2,000 plus LGBT Canadians to the research. Our whole sort of philosophy at CMI is balance. So just to let you know, what we do is we balance by generation. So the three major generations are balanced in their opinion. Gay men and lesbians are balanced in their opinion. It's balanced with the bisexual women and bisexual male community. And also the gender expansive community will actually range between 5 to 10% of our group, depending on how many are included in the research or how many responds. And also for the Canadian research, we do have all your major provinces represented, and we do field in English and French. All right, so really quickly, and this really goes on what was just said, is that we've asked this question in the community survey for a long time. And this is the concept: do you live in an LGBT-friendly city, town, or community? Do you live in an LGBT-friendly state or province, or do you live in an LGBT-friendly country? And this is again from the community survey this past summer. Now I think it's interesting when we look at do you live in an LGBT-friendly city, town, or community, most people in the United States and Canada end up finding an LGBT-friendly neighborhood. They really do. In the more conservative states in the US, sometimes they have to look a little bit harder. But for the most part, that's in our sort of almost our DNA that we're going to look for a place or a neighborhood that we feel welcome. All right? We go back down the line. Do you live in an LGBT-friendly state or province? And I think here what's really interesting is that 92% of Canadians say they live in an LGBT-friendly state or province, and it drops down to 66% for the people in the United States. And I think this last statistics is amazing. We asked the question, do you live in an LGBT-friendly country? In the United States, 56% agreed with that statement. 98% of Canadians agreed with that statement.
So yeah, we love you.
Now, I can tell you that we've been tracking this for a while. It's decreased in the United States recently, that percentage, and it's increased for Canada, that percentage. But I can tell you, we've been doing a lot of these different surveys. I don't think I've ever received 98% for any question out there. So it says a lot about what's happening here in Canada right now. All right, a little bit more from the travel survey. If you actually download the travel survey, say tomorrow, there's lots of numbers. I'm not going to put out a lot of number charts, but I just want to talk about one thing really quickly is, when we do our research for many destinations out there, one of the big things they will talk about or ask about is, should we be outreaching to the United States? How should we include Canadian residents? How much money should we put towards Canada versus the United States? It's a really big topic for us in our research. And generally, when we look and compare the USA report versus the Canadian report, we find that USA and Canadian LGBT travelers are the same in a lot of ways. We'll talk about the differences a little bit, but let me talk about where we're about the same. We actually travel very similarly as far as the number of trips. You'll actually find in the research that United States residents actually take more trips, just a little bit, than Canadian residents. But to balance that off, Canadians spend a lot more time at destinations than US residents do. And if you look at over the overall travel spend, it all sort of equals out a little bit. But that is a big difference, is that within the Canadian traveler, they just tend to spend more days in destinations. We also like to talk a little bit about the traveler type. I think sometimes the LGBT market is pigeonholed as sort of a luxury traveler, and there certainly are luxury travelers within the market. But we actually look at the statistic and we ask what type of traveler you are from a price point. We'll find that the LGBT community tends to be moderate to just above moderate, the vast majority of us. But there's also a big budget traveler market out there, and what we often like to say is that no matter what segment you represent, like if you're a hotel group, if you're W or the Fairmont or you're Motel 6, there's a place in the LGBT community for you, because we go across that spectrum on budget. But we're hardly just luxury travelers. We're actually all over the board. And that's true for Canadians, and it's true for the United States too. So that's a couple ways that the research shows that we're similar. But let's talk a little bit about how we're different. All right, so this is a question we've asked for a while, and I'll let Tom talk about this one.
So in terms of longer vacations versus shorter vacations, 53% of Canadian LGBTQs took longer vacations of 4+ nights. 51% took short vacations of 1 to 3 nights. But what I think is important here is the priority. We are born to travel. I mean, we travel more than get a salon or spa service. We travel more than get a ticket to a sports game, which could just be down the street. Travel is really our passion as a community, and for those who are new and maybe not part of the community, if you go to a reception or if you go to a gay bar or a lesbian bar, the conversation always turns to travel. Where have I been recently and where am I going next? So this sort of demonstrates that passion.
One thing I'll add to that is that within this particular research, for Canadians, the passion of travel is actually higher than the passion of travel for LGBT people in the United States. So that's another big point within the LGBT community in Canada, is that there seems to be somewhat of a higher passion for travel.
Right. And then when we look at a comparison between the US and Canada, as Dave mentioned, USA is a little bit lower on the short-term vacations, the longer vacations than Canada, and it switches a little bit for the shorter vacations, meaning that Canadians, when we do pack up our bags and go someplace, we're going to spend more time there. And I think as tourism professionals and hospitality professionals, that's a really important point, and it's a distinguishing point between Americans and Canadians, is when Canadians travel, they're moving there for a short period of time, but they are spending a longer time at that destination, which is great for the bottom line. Now, we're also, as Canadians, all year-round travelers. A lot of the general market is really about the winter holiday and the summer school holiday. With the LGBTQ community, it's really year-round. We're typically known as a DINK market, double income, no kids. The Wall Street Journal coined that back in 1992 when we began. But and that's changing, obviously, with LGBT families, which David is going to talk about in a second. But the main point here is we're more able to travel year-round, and so therefore, if you are looking for filling beds or your destination during the shoulder seasons, we're a great market for that.
All right, now I want to talk a little bit about LGBTQ family travel. And this is where I think where Canadians have such a positive view of what's happening with diversity in the LGBT community here. It influences things like LGBT family market. So we've asked this question for a long time of people who have parents of children under age 18. If I forced you to pick one, do you want to travel to an LGBT-friendly destination or a child-friendly destination? Or do you want to travel to an LGBTQ-friendly destination or an LGBT-friendly hotel? If I had to force you to pick one or the other, which one would you pick? And here in Canada, 75% are really leaning more towards the child-friendly side. And I think that's the case largely because you feel really confident that no matter where you go here in Canada, that you'll be treated with dignity and respect. Well, I think what's interesting in a comparison that parents in the United States have a little bit of a different view on that. They still lean more towards child-friendly, but they have a 14 percentage point difference of needing to worry about LGBT-friendly destinations. And we hear that all the time in like our focus groups, is that LGBT parents, if they travel with their kids, they don't want to be harassed. They don't want to be harassed because A, they're there to have fun, but B, they don't want their kids to experience that. So going to an LGBT-friendly destination is really important. So what I'm saying is that child-friendly is also, of course, very important. There's no point taking a child to a child-unfriendly destination. You're going to have a bad time. But Canadians are a little bit more open, maybe, than Americans are, or United States residents are. All right, so this is really important and different. What types of overnight vacations have you taken with your children in the past 12 months? So what I think is interesting here for Canadian parents is that it's really all over the place. What you'll find with urban and city vacations, and you may surprise you that you're number one, but what the focus groups would say for city and urban vacations is that parents want to go to a place that's child-friendly, but also adult interesting, right? And what's happening with urban vacations, I think here is, opportunities like you say the aquarium here in Toronto serve both of those functions. So if your destination, don't underestimate the power of taking LGBT families to your big city because you are child-friendly destinations. But I think some of the differences between USA parents and Canadian parents is that in the US, you find that beach towns really come much, much higher. And I think the reason there is that you learn from the focus groups is that if you're a parent, you don't necessarily want to get on a plane. It's a much more regional kind of trip. You'd prefer to drive there or maybe take a train. And there are just so many beach destinations in the United States that are close to major population centers. And that's also true of like the large theme park destinations that in the US, all those big theme parks are in Southern California or Florida, and there's huge populations there that travel to them, and it's easy. So you find that those percentages go a little bit higher in the US. But in Canada, it tends to be more urban vacations, small towns, resort towns that are easy for parents to get to with their kids. All right, a little bit about international travel. A little bit easier for you.
So back to me. I love this, and we've been monitoring this since 1994 when we did our first LGBT travel survey. We're in our 23rd year of doing our annual travel surveys. And in the United States, we've always found that LGBTQs have a valid passport far more than the general population. General population in the US is more like about 30%. I think this tells the story of LGBTQ people as travelers, that we all have a valid passport and many of us use them. However, Canada even ups the USA in this regard. Canadians, 86% have a valid passport, and 73% of those Canadians with a valid passport actually used it in the past year. And I see some people taking pictures. That's fine. This will be available to everybody, so we'll make sure it's on the IGLTA site as well as ours. But I want to say that our motivations for travel are a little bit different than the general market. And I think this is really important. Many of you work with the general market and with LGBTQ. Safety is a big concern for LGBTQ travelers, okay? And I think that's important to put into your communications. Just as a quick example, we worked with Greater Fort Lauderdale on a study for the transgender traveler, and safety came up so high as a concern for the transgender community when they travel. And it runs across the board for LGBTs, not only safety as a foreigner, but safety as an LGBTQ person. And right after that is anti-LGBTQ laws or rules in the destination. We want to avoid those places. Obviously, as Dave mentioned, we want to travel, we want to have a good time, and we certainly don't want to have a bad experience. So these are kind of our more emphatic priorities. Less is natural disasters, visa rules, currency, language. We're less bothered by those things, which I think may bother the mainstream a little bit more than us. Now, I want to call out the safety as an LGBTQ person. In all of our surveys, we typically get 1,000 to 2,000 responses. So we're able to do this matrix, looking at gender, identity, and generation. And we find a lot of differences when we can dive in a little bit deeper like that. And our clients find a lot of opportunity in those differences. So safety as an LGBTQ person may not be surprising as a gender expansive population. It's really important to 75%. So if you really want to be LGBT inclusive, you also have to address and understand the T. And thank you to Fort Lauderdale for doing that study, and that's also posted on our website, the Transgender Traveler Study. And it's also very important to millennials. We may think of millennials as more worldly and more comfortable going anywhere, but really safety is kind of a concern for them too. So it's really important, again, to look at the generations when you're looking at reaching to the community.
All right. So a little bit, this is a big topic in the US, and is our current administration affecting travel to the United States? So we asked those questions too in this survey. So it's not as bad as it originally seemed. In the summer 2017, we asked how likely are you to travel to the United States for the next 12 months? And we had 56% of Canadians say they're unlikely to travel, and that really alarmed a lot of people. In the spring 2018, in this survey, we asked, did you actually travel in the past 12 months? And about 50% said yes. So the statistics weren't quite as bad, and I think we're seeing that in a lot of international travel into the United States, and that's true for the Canadian LGBT travelers too. But we also asked, why won't you be traveling to the United States? And the top reason is the policies of our new president by far. Second is I don't feel welcome as an LGBTQ person, and I think that has to do with the policies of the new administration and president. So it's a big topic in the United States tourism world about what's happening with our international travel numbers and how this situation we've gotten ourselves into are influencing that income stream. We also, of course, asked about other things like safety and crime. They just didn't really register like the policy statements did. And I want to talk about destination selection a little bit because I think it's interesting. We do these priority questions. So I think all these things are important, but we ask people what are your top 3 attributes that you care about on this list below. And it gets people to prioritize. So if we ask people to check anything that's important, all these percentages would come up, but these are the top priorities. So the top priority for Canadian travelers is known for its scenic and natural beauty, and that doesn't surprise me because Canada is such a naturally beautiful place, and I think it's really important to Canadians. What I think is important here, and it's always the case, it always tends to be a little bit more important to the lesbian and bisexual women than the gay and bisexual men, who tend to be a little bit more urban and oriented. Known to be LGBT friendly, really important, but particularly to the gender expansive community, and I don't surprise that. But what surprises some people is it's so important to millennials. So some people assume that LGBT friendly is just a baby boomer thing, and it's not. You actually see the numbers start to trail off. Millennials care about being known as an LGBT friendly destination. We also ask, what are your top 3 activities? Again, the priorities. The number one thing, and I want to say this, and this is not Canadian specific, is interesting and unique tourism attractions. Now that's like a no-brainer, but I just bring this up because it's important across all generations. I can't tell you how many tourism ads I've seen out there that are featuring like, I don't know, rocks on the back of somebody in a spa or salmon. And it's not, I can get that anywhere, right? So one thing that I really want to stress is that in all your tourism communications with the LGBT community, this concept of interesting and unique tourist attractions is important. And then also to point out that LGBT-specific activities like nightlife and neighborhood tends to be more interesting and important to millennials than older generations, and tends to be more important to women in the gender-expansive community than it does to lesbian and bisexual women. We want to talk about the top destinations. We separate it by gay and bisexual men and then lesbian and bisexual women. Not surprised, tourism is regional. So the top destinations for the Canadian travelers in the survey are Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. No surprise there, they're top 3 destinations. Tourism can be a little bit regional. One of the reasons I think Vancouver trails off just a little bit there is because there's so many more people on the East Coast than the West Coast, and that is true for any destination. What I think that's really important here is the international destinations here, and I think the Canadian travel is far, far, far more worldly than the US traveler is and where they go. So you can see it's all over the place, really strong numbers for Cuba, for Puerto Vallarta with the men, and relatively few US destinations here. Certainly they're there. But what I want to really stress to the destinations that are here representing in the United States is that you got to work a lot harder because you really are competing with the world when it comes to the Canadian traveler. And if you want that Canadian traveler to come to your city in the US, you can't just assume that you're competing with other cities around you because you're really not. On the women's side, what we see here is I think it's interesting. Again, the top 3 are the top 3, but Banff really comes up for the women. So it's quite a good response there by lesbian and bisexual women. And as Puerto Vallarta was really high for the gay men, Cancun's really high for lesbian and bisexual women, so that's a big difference for where they're traveling in Mexico. A lot of research projects, when we get them, the client asks, if we get someone from the city that represents or lives in our city, let's exclude them. And that's not what we do. We actually ask people, we actually include, if say it's a Canadian survey, we included people in Toronto, Montreal, or Vancouver in a different question set to tell us about their city and why it makes it important. So it's really interesting. When we look at the residents of Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver, all cities, and we look at their comments of what makes them an appealing destination, they all had some commonalities. They all really had pride in their LGBTQ village. They're really all proud about their diversity and multicultural city. And they're super proud about the acceptance and safety that goes throughout the city, not just their village. But we found that was different. Montreal residents are really proud about their vibrant and edgy arts and culture scene. Toronto is really proud that they view themselves as a world-class city with world-class entertainment, cultural institutions, and dining. And Vancouver is really proud about their beautiful scenery and outreach and outdoor recreation. And we'll finish up.
So yes, we've run out of time. Thank you for your attention on this. Again, the report will be available for download off of our website tomorrow. We're also going to dive a little bit deeper into what we call our LGBTQ Tourism and Hospitality 101 in a workshop at 4 o'clock, which will give you a little bit more depth behind this. We realized this was kind of a quick overview. We have a lot of experience after 25 years of doing this to share with you, and we'd like to continue that conversation, so we're doing that at 4 o'clock today. And then, if you want a copy of the report or this presentation, just let us know. You can either email us or give a business card, and we'll send you all the links that we talked about today.
Great.
All right? So thank you.